That's it for now. More in an hour.
News Talk Weather.
Thanks to the AA, you can find our best discounts on car insurance online. Go to the aa.ie.
A band of rain, sleet and snow will spread across the country from the northwest tonight. Very cold with lowest temperatures of -1 to -4 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
The News Round on Off the Ball.
With Gillette, we don't just play the game, we change it. Gillette, made of what matters.
This is News Talk.
Hello there, you're very welcome along. So it's Wednesday evenings Off the Ball. We have a Manchester derby in the semi-final of the Carabao Cup to look forward to this evening. All as the Premier League announce 40 positive COVID tests this week, which is a record and not one that they wanted to break. We'll bring you team news very shortly. We'll check in with Miguel Delaney as well, just after 7:30. Connacht's win at the RDS has injected serious life into the weekend's Interpro games in the Pro 14. Meanwhile, Keith Wood, Rory O'Connor after 8. We'll hear from Ireland's fastest woman, Phil Healy, on the Olympic year ahead. And Philippe Auclair will join us on the football show. Poch has pitched up in Paris. Kevin Doyle with us as well. He'll be watching the United game against City. Give us some thoughts on Liverpool's wobbles too. And Jack Byrne suddenly at the training ground over in Nicosia today going, what's all this? 53106, the text number. We're at Off the Ball on Twitter. Richie McCormack, it's been a while. Hello.
Happy New Year to you, Joe.
Likewise, my man. You had a good Christmas, I hope?
Yeah. Mentally quiet, but a lot of activity on Nintendo Switches suddenly in this house. So I'm learning a lot. As opposed to the others in this house learning a lot at the moment.
Good. Meanwhile, he's wondering who's going to retire next. Nathan Murphy, hello to you.
These are dark days, Joe. Dark days indeed. Will there be anybody left for a league and championship in Mayo?
Listen, it's a clear out. I mean, it's hard to know. Do you choreograph them all at once, or is that too much for people to handle? How this drip feed approach is starting to hurt people.
It clearly has been choreographed, doesn't it?
Yeah.
That actually everybody gets their one day in the sun, and who will be tomorrow. There's probably a couple of players still to go, I would expect. Keith Higgins is going to be 36 next month. Was only a substitute in the All-Ireland final. Has he that much more to give? And maybe one or two more. Somebody like Colin Boyle, who I know has had an injury, which maybe might want him to stay on for one more year so he can go out and give it his best possible crack. But yeah, this is a group that you look at the amount of Connacht medals that all these players have won, and the amount of All-Ireland finals that they've all played in. They have given a heck of a lot. Quite a few of the players who've retired over the last couple of days have, lived outside of Mayo, have put in any amount of hours travelling up and down. So they couldn't have done any more. And I think every one of them can bow out with their head held high. And most of them probably were ready. David Clarke is the one, even though probably the eldest of them so far, was the one surprised because he was the one who started the All-Ireland final. And you felt if he'd wanted to stay, surely that number 1 jersey was his for another year.
Yeah, I would have thought so. So the COVID situation, I mean, how can we not mention it? It is terribly worrying once again. You suspect it is totally at the forefront of people's minds again. Even I was out for a walk earlier and you just see people and you suspect it's what they're thinking about. It feels as present in the atmosphere and in very real terms as well as it has been since March. So that is in the ether, and if you're having a tough time, by all means, drop us a text and let's talk about something silly like sport for a while. But it's affecting sport too, Nathan, because the Premier League, generally they've been announcing how many COVID positive tests happen on a weekly basis over the last while. And generally it doesn't make too much news, but it has today because they've hit 40 in the past week, 40 positive tests across players and staff this week. I was having a look back to get some sense of context. So certainly in September there was a week where they had 10. And towards the end of November, they had 14 positive tests. But if you take the last 4 weeks through December and into January, it was 6 in the second week of December. Then it was 7 positive tests in a week. It was 18 last week, and it's now jumped to 40. So if we start seeing similar jumps over the next couple of weeks, then words like exponential are going to start being used, and this thing could teeter, whereby either authorities and governments say you need to shut this down a little bit, or even players may say this is starting not to feel so safe. But it is teetering, it feels like, at the moment, looking at the trajectory of those figures and everything else beyond sport.
Yeah, it does feel that the trajectory is still far lower than the greater population, and they did test twice this week, so they have tested over 2,000 players, officials, backroom staff, and still it's 40 out of 2,000. So it is clearly worrying, and it is the thing that's always forgotten when we look at these numbers. There's a person who's received that news that they have the test, whether they're earning 350 grand a week or 350 quid a week. We don't know if they're living with their elderly parents, whether they were over for Christmas. We don't know what the backroom story, so it's hugely concerning. But I think football, by and large, has handled this quite well. Players have done some stupid things at times, but the numbers relative to the rest of the population still seem quite low. And there doesn't seem to be any desire at all to press pause on this. And I guess the concern, like everything, is when you press pause right now, when do you get to restart? Like, what is the acceptable level that you get down to, and how long will it take to get there before you can restart once again? There's been a desire right from very early in this, from the British government, I think from governments around the world, for elite sport to keep going, whether it is for that entertainment purpose. But it doesn't feel to me as if we're massively closer to the Premier League, a total stall being put on this, than we were, say, even a week ago, when games are going to be called off, more games will be called off, but I still think they're going to try and roll this on for as long as is possible.
Yeah, I would think so as well. And their line throughout has been that we have total faith in the protocols. And I suspect that'll be their line going forward. And as you said, 40 out of well over 2,000 tests isn't anything approaching, crazy levels. FA Cup third round this week, a bit trickier. I mean, you've got...
That's going to pay a price.
Yeah.
And it already is. Shrewsbury, I know it doesn't necessarily form a blip on most people's radar, but Shrewsbury down in League One, they had, I think, 10 cases today. They're in consultation with the FA and the EFL and their local Shropshire authorities as well. Their game with Southampton, it looks like is going to be postponed. Southampton apparently are expecting that game to be called off. Derby as well have an outbreak at their club. They're playing Chorley Town, a non-league outfit, on Saturday lunchtime, I think it is. And Wayne Rooney and everybody else pretty much has been stood down for that game. They're going to do what Jurgen Klopp and Liverpool did in the Carabao Cup last year against Aston Villa, where they fielded an underage side. So the FA Cup is going to feel the pinch this weekend. I think we're going to see over the course of the next 2 days in the lead up to those matches, we're going to see a lot more instances where clubs have been backed into a corner, and if they are in a position like Derby to field an underage or an under-strength side, they absolutely will make no bones about doing that. Or if they are a team like Shrewsbury, or they are a League Two or a non-league side who are in action this weekend, they will probably call off their particular match, which is going to create this backlog effect down the line, because we don't have replays, as we know, in the FA Cup further down the line anymore. But we're going to see matches that will need to be played at some stage to get them out of the way, because I don't think they're in favour of forfeitures along the line.
Yeah, we'll check in with Miguel Delaney 7:30 and see what he suspects is the word over in the UK. Usually has very good contacts and we'll have a sense of what the mood is. Let's kick off the news round. It is as ever with thanks to Gillette. And Richie, you're starting with the main game this evening. Good game as well.
Yeah, decent game. We've got a Manchester derby in the offing to decide who meets Tottenham in the final of the Carabao Cup. Manchester United taking on City at Old Trafford. Kickoff is at 7:45. The team news is in for this one. For United, Dean Henderson starts in goal for them tonight. They've got a back four of Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Victor Lindelof, Harry Maguire, Luke Shaw, and Scott McTominay and Fred are in midfield. In front of them, the trio of Paul Pogba, Bruno Fernandes and Marcus Rashford, with Anthony Martial leading the line. For City, a change in goal. Zach Steffen, the American, is between the posts for them tonight. A back four then of Joao Cancelo, John Stones, Ruben Dias and Alexander Zinchenko. Fernandinho comes into the side alongside Ilkay Gundogan and Kevin De Bruyne in midfield, with Riyad Mahrez and Raheem Sterling in support of the false nine tonight, which looks like it's going to be Phil Foden. City's preparations for the game were affected with 3 more positive COVID-19 cases among their staff. They are reserve goalkeeper Scott Carson, young midfielder Cole Palmer, who's featured earlier on in the season, and an unnamed member of staff as well. City had 6 players unavailable for last weekend's win over Chelsea in the Premier League because they also returned positive results. Both sides are expected to pay tribute to Colin Bell before tonight's game. The legendary Manchester City midfielder died yesterday at the age of 74. That followed a short illness. City players are going to wear retro replica shirts with the former England midfielder's number 8 emblazoned on the back. Joe Corrigan is one of the many who played with Bell at City.
He brought a different aspect to the game where he could, as I said before, he could defend and within seconds be on the edge of the opposition's box and be able to score goals. He could score goals with his right foot, his left foot and his head. But his biggest attribute was his stamina, and his work rate was phenomenal. You know, we used to go to Wythenshawe Park when we were under Joe and Malcolm, and he at the end of the day could have. We used to train with Derek Ibbotson, and Derek said he could have been an Olympic athlete if he'd have been trained that way, you know. But he used to take the mickey out of us when we were running around breathing through every orifice that we could possibly breathe through. He just canter past us as if it was a stroll in the park, which it was for him. But he was a phenomenal athlete, phenomenal.
Breathing through every orifice possible. I think we've all been that soldier for times. So, I mean, Man City are intriguing. We're keeping close tabs on United generally, and they're gaining a bit of form here and there. I mean, you wouldn't say they've been spellbinding. They got that deflected goal against Wolves. They got over the line against Villa. There's a bit of belief creeping in. Man City, far more interesting, Nathan, in that performance we saw against Chelsea was suddenly out of nowhere, effectively akin to what they have done, 2-3 years ago, even as Guardiola himself said. So the interesting question is, has switch been flicked, and maybe this is the start now of a very impressive run, or will we look back on that Chelsea performance as, a high point in an otherwise very inconsistent season?
Yeah, they've really struggled for that level of consistency. It was the speed of it on Sunday that was reminiscent, and it was almost the exact opposite of Liverpool, where Liverpool was slow, lethargic, and they both play in such a similar way that when that speed and energy is key to everything that they do, and Liverpool looked suddenly jaded, and it was the flick of a switch. Something happened in that game, and they analysed it quite well afterwards, where Chelsea just seemed to lose their nerve, but City capitalised on it, and it is now whether they can bring that momentum forward. And I'm really excited about this game, suddenly looking at those two starting 11s. Like, both those sides are almost at full strength. They've both gone all guns blazing. Pep Guardiola possibly looking at it as, well, we do need to kick on. We do need to try and keep that momentum. We can rest players at the weekend in the FA Cup. And City are the danger to Liverpool, albeit everything's going to be on Liverpool United on Sunday week. And if United could win that game, obviously they're right there in the mix. But you still feel City are the one who can go on that 7-8 game winning streak, if anybody can do it. The problem is the consistency of selection. United still have an awful lot to give, is the other thing. I was looking at it earlier. Like, Mason Greenwood scored 1 league goal all season. Anthony Martial scored 2. Marcus Rashford's got 7 after a good run over the last while. Like, this is a United side that could still improve a huge amount over the coming weeks if they could find a little bit of form. So I wouldn't be surprised if we had a bit of a 3-way title race right to the end. But City, that winning culture that they have within them would give you'd have a bit more faith in them. But do they have the goals without Aguero? They still have to prove they can do that over a 3-4 week period, which for going on well over a year at this stage, they haven't. Like, even last season when they were racking up big score lines and they were putting 8 past Watford, 10 days later there'd be this drab 1-1 draw where they were at half the pace they were. So they still have a lot to prove, but that was by far the best we've seen from them this season, and probably the closest. I still think Liverpool, as bad as they've been, the performances against Leicester, against Wolves, maybe even against Palace, are probably as good as any team has played this season until Manchester City put that in against Chelsea at the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, Liverpool's centre-half situation is just a mess. I mean, generally it is Fabinho, and he's had a mixture of Phillips, Matip, Reece Williams, and then Henderson, obviously, against Southampton. And you see, when you lose Henderson from midfield, you lose so much tempo in Liverpool's game. And, you almost think if Klopp went to the board and said, if you sign a really good centre-half here, I'll almost certainly win you the league. Whereas we're taking a chance if we don't. There's still a good chance that we can go on a decent run here and we'll rediscover some of our old selves. But, I mean, they just can't keep persevering with that situation. It's just too messy.
It's gotten to the point where they need another centre-half anyway, because Matip in his injury profile can't be relied upon.
Yeah.
So if you have, say, Joe Gomez and Virgil van Dijk are going to be their starting centre-halves going forward, and there's no reason to believe that that'll change regardless of how they come back in the next while. But you can't rely on Matip to put together a 3-4 game run, especially with the schedule the way it is for Premier League sides at the moment, and for teams that are involved in the Champions League as well. It's impossible for him to get 3-4 games on the turn, given the way he breaks down so regularly. So you either put faith in a Reece Williams and say, listen, you can do this, you've done okay so far, we believe in you, and stop sacrificing midfielders to go back and play alongside Fabinho, who's been sacrificed himself to go back there, albeit he's done quite well. But yeah, they do need to sign somebody in January of a decent standing and somebody who can bridge that gap, possibly not even for the next 6 months, but for the time that Joel Matip is probably going to spend away from the club come next summer.
Yeah, I think it feels a bit early for Reece Williams based on some performances thus far. There's some really shaky moments where he just looks way out of his depth all of a sudden. He's only 19, so
It needs to be the right player as well, Joe, because the key for Liverpool and what makes them so good is that everything is interlinked, that the forwards don't play as well if the defence isn't solid and can't push right up to the halfway line and keep teams pressed back and just keep that ball ping-ponging back to the opposite penalty area constantly. And if you've Reece Williams, you probably are stepping back a little bit just to make sure he's covered that little bit more. It changes the entire dynamic. And the other thing is, and we don't know what happened behind the scenes that year when Loris Karius has played in the Champions League final. Like, we've seen how damaging not making the right move can be. Not getting a goalkeeper a year earlier ended up costing Liverpool a Champions League title. Not signing a centre half could easily end up costing them a Premier League title.
It's true. It's all making for a fascinating league. You've got to say it's really enjoyable at the moment. We'll let you know how City are lining up as soon as we get a better picture.
I gave it to you, Joe.
Did you have the formation?
It'll be a 4-3-3 with City, like it usually is, and Foden will be the false 9, I'd imagine.
But he was on the left against Chelsea. It was De Bruyne false 9 and Raheem Sterling on the right and Foden on the left. So I'm presuming they'll go with the same again.
Pretty much the same again. Yeah, it's more or less the exact same team, except with, I think, Fernandinho. Well, Mahrez is in there as well. Sorry, Mahrez is there, so he has Mahrez, Foden, and Sterling. Yeah. So maybe De Bruyne does play a little bit deeper.
Yeah. So it's slightly different to Chelsea. It was one of those games where, you know, for all of the moments where Guardiola experiments and does something, you know, way over the top against Lyon in the Champions League, there was when you did watch City in full flow on Sunday, and it was very much Rodri as the sole sitting midfielder, and Silva and Gundogan were pushed on. De Bruyne, a false 9 out of nowhere. Even like Gary Neville, Martin Tyler scratching their heads at the start of the game. Foden on the left as opposed to Sterling on the right. Fullbacks underlapping as opposed to overlapping. Danny Murphy did a really good piece on that on Match of the Day. And it all works beautifully. You do kind of go at times, there is a genius to Pep as well. You know, there's obviously been some shaky moments, but there are times where it just works beautifully. There, Nathan suggested you disagree with that. Pep Guardiola, rubbish.
I think it's clearly not. I think when it works as perfectly, everything fits into place. But I was commentating on Manchester City West Brom a couple of weeks ago, where the fullbacks played exactly that role, and Cancelo, every time you looked at him, was playing in the centre of midfield, and it didn't work. They ended up drawing 1-1. Raheem Sterling that night played on the right, and you're looking at him going, why would you put Sterling on the right when he's so devastating on the left? So when it does click into place, and I think that is the one thing that City proved, that Liverpool proved, these tactics that these high-level managers implement are so complicated that everything has to work perfectly for it all to look beautiful. Whereas if one little thing breaks down, it's very flat and very predictable. And the analysis was dead right. It was, you're looking at De Bruyne going, finally they've this. You don't need Sergio Aguero. Just play De Bruyne there every week. But now we're looking tonight, and he's probably changed them already. You
forget that was a Sam Allardyce-inspired West Ham, of course, Nathan. So who would have? No,
that was a Slaven Bilic. That was a Slaven Bilic-inspired West Brom.
Was Sam not lurking? Was there?
He was lurking. That was his last game. It was about an hour. About an hour after that.
I think some credit was given to Sam, or else taken by Sam. Maybe Sam took the credit afterwards. He was like, "Look, you know." Will the last person out of Mayo please turn out the lights? Who's the next big casualty? Nathan's beard, wonders Kevin. If the Mayo lads weren't good enough to get over the line over the last few years, you can see where this is going, then they're not going to get any better with age, so why all the gloominess? It's the right time to give the young lads a chance. Andy Moran last night gave me grounds for hope about the next generation of players, says Bob. On the Premier League COVID rate of positives, lads, do the maths. 40 out of 2,000 cases is the equivalent of 2,000 cases per 100,000. This is a way higher incidence than any county in Ireland. It means 1 in 50 are positive, says Niall. And Nintendo Switch, even Richie's kids have hipster taste, says one texter. I mean, you wouldn't have it any other way.
No, well, it was Santi's doing, but yeah.
Could you recommend a Switch? It's my eldest's 9th birthday, and he's been hinting at it, and we've been pushing him back, unfortunately, till next Christmas, which is a long time to wait.
Good luck with that.
But once this lockdown was coming in, I was thinking, actually, maybe for everybody's sake, maybe even for my own sake, we should just go and do this.
For everybody's sanity, I'd say you should probably invest. I did the mistake of doing a side-by-side comparison. The eldest lad has FIFA 21 on his at the moment, and I did the side-by-side comparison. It goes, look, this is what a handheld game of football looked like 25 years ago when I had a Game Boy, and I showed him the Game Boy version, original Game Boy version of FIFA 95. Eyes nearly popped out of his head. He couldn't believe that we were scratching together with. I might as well have shown him a picture of me rolling a hoop down the road with a stick. It was so arcane and rubbish.
Don't worry, his time will come. Happens to us all. So we're blathering on here a bit. So that's the Manchester derby this evening. Richie, I'll let you take us through some stories. Obviously, Mick McCarthy, I mean, bloody hell, 9 games, game over.
Yeah, APOEL Nicosia wasted little time in replacing McCarthy. In fact, the former Republic of Ireland boss sacked today by the Cypriot First Division strugglers after just 9 games in charge. APOEL have lost each of their last 4 matches, and McCarthy has been replaced today by Savas Poursaitidis. Jack Byrne made his APOEL debut last night. He came on 5 minutes from the end of their defeat to Doxa, but McCarthy just the latest managerial casualty at APOEL. They've had a very high turnover, to say the least, over the course of the last 5 years. As you mentioned there, another day, another Mayo retirement. Shamie O'Shea becoming the 4th player in as many days to step away from James Horan's panel. The briefing man made 51 championship appearances for Mayo. He won 7 Connacht titles along the road as well. And O'Shea follows David Clark, Donald Vaughan and Tom Parsons in retiring from the Mayo fold this week. More could perhaps come as well. Shane Enright, meanwhile, says he was frustrated at a lack of game time, which has led to his Kerry retirement. He spent 10 years on the Kingdom panel, winning an All-Ireland medal in 2014 and an All-Star the following year. It's the 3rd retirement this week in the Kerry ranks, with Brian Kelly and Jonathan Lyon also hanging up their boots. And former Cork hurling captain Stephen McDonnell has retired from inter-county action as well today. The Glen Rovers clubman captained the Rebels to a Munster Championship success in 2017. He also won a Munster medal in 2014, and he started both matches of that replayed 2013 All-Ireland final with Clare.
So on Mick McCarthy, I mean, 2 months in, 9 games in charge. It started quite well for him, Nathan. I can't claim to have seen much of APOEL in action, but his first 5 games, our first 4 games, 3 wins and a draw, and then 4 defeats in a row put paid to his tenure. Basically, they've won, 7 championships in a row. They're now looking to avoid relegation playoffs, so he seems to have inherited a bad situation. McCarthy said last night after the loss, "My position is tomorrow we'll return to work, we'll continue to work. I know it's not acceptable for APOEL. I do what I can, as in all the games in my career, but unfortunately at the moment it doesn't work." And then shortly after those comments, he got the bullet. I mean, for Jack Byrne, it really is not what he wanted. There was so much riding on this move for it to go well, and he would have rightly assumed that, well, okay, Mick has just started in this job. By just any kind of standard, he'll get 18 months. My contract's till 2023. I've got a manager here who knows what I'm about and who likes me. This is a good move. And now he's at training today looking at the new guy.
Yeah, it's got to be really concerning. And listen, Jack Byrne, we know about his talents. Everything we've heard is that it's still a step up in standard from what he was at with Shamrock Rovers. And there's a new manager coming in. He'll have his own ideas, his own players. So it's not as straightforward, that's for sure. Mick McCarthy would have known exactly what he wanted to do with him. It's not dead calls yet, but we've seen this happen before. Was it Daryl Horgan when he went to Preston? The manager changes a couple of months later, and suddenly Daryl Horgan finds himself out of the picture. The managers bring in players even if things are going badly, and I'm sure it's one of the reasons that Mick McCarthy wanted them. I'm sure Mick, when he went into this job, went in with his eyes wide open, was able to look at the amount of managers they had gone through, and had made sure that he'd got himself a contract that reflected the situation and the precariousness of the position. But still hugely disappointing for him to be gone within just a few months. And I'm sure Jack Byrne is over there looking around, and how could he not be concerned?
Yeah. Brian Garland has signed on at Dundalk.
Yeah, a new contract for the imposing centre-half at Dundalk, who joined the Lilywhites in 2013 and since then has helped them win 5 league titles and 3 FAI Cups. He's the latest member of their squad to put pen to paper on a new deal this week, following the likes of Michael Duffy, Dan Kelly, Dave McMillan and Cameron Dummigan. Meanwhile, it's believed the Scottish Football Association will not be investigating Celtic's mid-season trip to Dubai. First Minister there, Nicola Sturgeon, questioned the purpose of the Premiership champions visit, while photos suggested the squad may not be complying with social distancing guidelines while there, but the SFA believes there is no need to look into Celtic's decision to go, which all relevant authorities signed off on in November. But Sturgeon mentioned the other day that November is a long, long time ago from now.
Yeah, I'm amazed they were still allowed to go. Tom English was on OTB AM this morning with the lads. Well worth listening to. He was given the overall picture at Celtic, which you won't be shocked to hear isn't great at the moment, not least after that defeat to Rangers, and then pictures emerge of Neil Lennon, Scott Brown by the pool, few beers out as Glasgow and Scotland go into lockdown for the full month. I mean, somebody, Nathan, somebody has to go. Now is not the time. We should not do this. But listen, bit of sunshine in Dubai. Oh.
Yeah, maybe we need a break. Golfing trip.
I think so.
I think we deserve it, Joe. A golf weekly outing.
We all deserve it, don't we? When are we going to go on holidays again?
What's a holiday?
Yeah. Yeah,
to Kerry.
To Kerry. They just shouldn't have gone to Dubai after that. I mean, what are you thinking? And, as the world goes into lockdown again. Anyway, Tom English was in OTB AM this morning, and it's well worth checking out on all our social channels or the OTB Sports app. Last couple of stories, Rich.
Yeah, Dean Gardner has walked away from his opportunity to represent Ireland at the Olympics later this summer. The Clonmel super heavyweight boxer was due to take part in the Olympic qualifiers in London in the spring, but Gardner has instead decided to quit the sport due to personal reasons. Meanwhile, a leading member of the International Olympic Committee thinks athletes should be given priority access to a coronavirus vaccine to make sure that this summer's Tokyo Games can go ahead. Dick Pound is the longest serving member of the IOC.
If it were not an Olympic year, that would be a different question to be asking, but in the circumstances, I really don't think there would be any significant outcry of unfair play and jumping the queue.
Oh, I don't know. I really don't like that starting. I don't like that at all. That's tone deaf. I saw a stat, this was last week, so it may have changed slightly, but I mean, Europe, with about 13% of the world's population, had hoovered up about 50% of the vaccines available at that time. Like, there is an awful reality here to the world, which is that the wealthier countries are going to be first in line for vaccines. I mean, the poorer parts of the world need to have their most vulnerable people receiving vaccinations long before any athlete gets it. I mean, sport has to know its place here, Nathan. For Dick Pound to say that publicly, I just think is tone deaf.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be the first time, I think, that the Olympic movement and everything around that has been a little bit off. They clearly are just desperate for it to go ahead. And yeah, I think you're right. Every stat, everything I've read suggests that the first world countries are doing what people sort of thought in March, April wouldn't happen, that when a vaccine came, that the rollout would be fair, it'd be equitable. That isn't the case. And people in this country want it quickly. Questions have been asked every single day. Nobody's thinking about what's happening in other countries around the world that are doing worse than us. All they're looking at is the countries that are flying ahead of us. They want it now, quickly as possible, understandably so. So to suggest that athletes in those countries would then get it first, and I'd imagine a lot of people in power in those countries would think that they deserve to get it first in some ways as well, because it reflects well on their country if they're going to major sporting events and doing well. So, yeah, God knows what will happen.
Indeed. Well, listen, I'll talk to you tomorrow. We've got Golf Weekly. We'll be looking ahead to the year ahead. So I'll chat to you then. Thanks very much.
Cheers, Joe.
And Richie McCormack, as ever. Pleasure. Thanks, Richie.
Mind yourself, lads.
Short ad break. Miguel Delaney is going to join us next ahead of the Manchester derby.
Hi, I'm Mick McCarthy and I'm second generation Irish and very proud of it. We're ready for a bit of verbal sparring, eh? What you got?